Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The SparkFile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, where we believe that everyone is creative, but smart people don't do it alone.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're joining us for the first time, you are so welcome, but you may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get a Spark File? What do I file in that Spark File? These are such good questions, and we have got answers.
We do. A Spark File is the place where you consistently collect all your inspirations and fascinations. And if you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, you already know that sometimes the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry. We're here to refill it.
Yes. We are on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity, things that inspire us to rise up off of our asses and make things like this very podcast.
Or poems. Lots of poems, written, spoken, slammed, or deaf poetry jammed.
Or truly inspired curriculum that motivates and moves students, changing the world one 8th grader at a time.
Or an anthem, a rallying cry for the value of teachers and the nobility of teaching.
On today's Makersode, we're going to talk with someone who truly sparks us.
And that someone is Taylor Molly.
Hello.
Taylor, welcome to the Spark File.
Thank you so much, Sparky. Hello.
Taylor Molly, as I live and breathe.
Taylor,
What a
we're so
joy.
happy that you're joining us today.
From the snow of Brooklyn.
Ooh,
Two-thirds
right.
of us. 2/3 of us are being snowed upon right now.
For those of you who are in the future, we happen to be recording this on just like the snowiest, blowiest.
Mhm.
We played a game today. This will be cut, I'm sure, from the episode. In our fitness class, we always play a name game before we start. And they said the name game today was, "You're a snowflake. What's your name?" And each person was like, "My name is Brenda. My name is Donnie. My name is Sparkles McGillicuddy." And I named my snowflake Oing!
I'm still triggered by snowflake. When
I think they meant it.
Of course they
Crystalline
did.
formation.
Of course they did.
I think they meant it in the best possible way. I love it.
I
thought that was
spent one semester at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, and
Sure.
there was and this was in the mid '80s. So, and they had a very cutting edge gay pride group come to campus and talk to the RAs. I wasn't an RA, but I lived with the RA.
You're like, I want in on that.
No, he came back, he was shaken. And I said, what? And he said, we had to go around the circle and we all had to say our names. And then they told us we had to say, and I'm gay. after that. And they just sort of wanted to put everybody on equal footing. They wanted the straight people to realize what it was like to come out, anyway.
Well, you have to tell us what happened then.
I'm Taylor Molly, and I'm a snowflake. I'm a liberal Brooklyn snowflake.
And you have to say, and my name is, what's your snowflake name, Taylor?
Oh, what would my snowflake name be? Kirby.
I love it. Laura, what's your snowflake name?
You know what's coming to me is Kitten. I don't know why.
Oh,
I'm Kitten the snowflake.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Kirby and Kitten made their way through the blizzard. But listen,
Lord.
I digress. I pulled us into a digression.
Oh my gosh, you did. But that's all right.
You know, we always begin with the Spark File price of admission. And we're going to hit you with it right now. Taylor Molly, real quick. Can you tell us a creative risk you've recently taken?
Yeah, I took one this morning.
Freshy.
I signed up. I'm a poet of a certain amount of renown and history.
Renown. Please, yes, get the word renown back in the zeitgeist. Yes.
I have you may point people to this in later on in the episode, but I've got a bunch of books and a bunch of National Poetry Slam championships
point
to
them
my
to
name.
It now. Yes.
And
you
so,
are renowned.
But I never want to be so good at my craft that I stop thinking that I can work on it. So
I love that.
In this time where I and many of my friends would be traveling the country or the world, teaching poetry workshops. I'm often if your kid comes home from school and says, we had a traveling poet come to school today, it might, in the past, it might have been me. But that really, I've had to cancel so many gigs, and that's been devastating for a lot of my friends. And so they've started teaching online poetry workshops.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
So I've started taking them.
So great.
So I show up in my friends' classes and
you get in your tiny desk.
Sometimes sometimes I have huge fans who are in the class who really can't.
Just in the next Zoom square over.
Yes. And they can't really focus on I can't believe I'm in a class with Taylor Molly. That's a nice ego boost, but I'm taking another one with my friend Megan Falley. And it's called Poems That Don't Suck. And I'm looking forward to it. Finding a new vein for me to tap into, or
love it. Absolutely.
New techniques for excavating. And I know I just mixed a metaphor there.
Okay,
I should just set cams.
Well, I was going to turn the page.
Turn it.
I'm turning it because I wanted to say, if you are tuning in right now, this person we're speaking to, do you remember, listeners, we had an episode where I talked about doing some shows at Kansas State University. And I spoke about these auditions that we had, and that this glorious human being walked into our auditions, took center stage, and just captivated us all. Taylor is that man. And that episode helped us reconnect, and 20 years later, right? Taylor, how did one of your fans tell you about it? How did that happen? How are we here right now?
A fan who is really more of a friend who listens to the show said that she was listening and just suddenly realized that you were talking about me. And it was thrilling for her to sort of hear some of my backstory that she didn't know, and so she alerted me to the Spark File. I listened to a couple of episodes, and I reached out to you and said, if you ever want to hear that story from my point of view, I'd love to do a show.
Oh, we do.
Showman.
We do. Tell us that story from the flip side.
Well, we know
as-
you weren't supposed to be auditioning for
I wasn't.
undergrad
I mean,
shows, Taylor.
grad students aren't supposed to have enough time to.
Grad students aren't supposed to have fun.
No theater for you, young man.
I don't think there was a. Were there grad students in theater? I don't think there was a. You couldn't
I
get
was a theater grad student when I was a grad
No,
student.
I mean,
you mean at K-State?
a master's.
Yeah,
Can you get a master's in theater at K-State?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe
you
now.
Could.
You
no,
could
there
then?
were. Yeah. There were. And they would teach like public speaking, and they would teach in the speech communication and theater department. So yeah.
Did they audition for the plays?
Yes, Lisa Nani. She was a grad student, and she had the lead in like Prelude to a Kiss.
Lisa Nani, Taylor.
Lisa Nani. Did you know her? Don't joke, Suze.
The only names I remember are Maria Santucci was the star of Hamlet.
Yes. She was not a grad student though. She was undergrad. She was undergrad.
And the guy who played Hamlet was Kevin somebody.
Kevin Kelly. He's here. He's in Florida. Yes, Kevin Kelly. He was
also an undergrad.
Also an undergrad. Yeah. So you performed with mostly undergrads, I think.
Well,
there you were.
I wasn't supposed to. But so I got special permission from the head of graduate studies to go and audition. But he said you, as if it was up to me, he said, you can't be Hamlet. And so I
really?
Yeah.
Meaning like
it
your
would take too much
with your
time,
coursework and
I can't remember whether Laura was there for. I did two shows at K-State. One was Midsummer Night's Dream, where I was bottom, and that's a great part. That's the part I wanted anyway. And that was about as big. I couldn't be Oberon. I couldn't be Lysander or Demetrius. I wanted to be bottom.
I mean, it's perfect. I mean,
and I don't know whether that was the audition that you saw me do. It was Hamlet.
Yeah, it was definitely Hamlet because I don't think I was there for Midsummer.
Okay. In Hamlet, I played either Rosencrantz or Guildenstern. I can't remember which one.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also got to play the Gravedigger at the end. And I remember that I loved playing those two parts. In my English class, I had already written, in fact, the only academic paper that I have ever presented at the Central Renaissance Conference in Lincoln, Nebraska, was about doubling in Shakespeare.
Yes.
So I was having a wonderful moment. All graduate students in English have to take a 1-credit class called History of the English Language. And the semester that I took that class was also the semester that I was taking a Shakespeare tragedy class. And then I was also in this play. Mm-hmm. And when I was on stage rehearsing, I could explicate certain lines that people didn't realize. And I would say, oh, well, actually that word back in Middle English in Shakespeare's time, that would have been pronounced this way. And
MVP.
And then when I was in my History of the English Language class, I was able to say, oh, well, that Shakespeare uses that. And when I was in my Shakespeare class, I was able to say, well, as an actor, I would have done it this way. And that's when you feel like you're getting the most out of your education. Is when you can use from one class something you learned in another class.
That is so true.
For sure.
And really make those connections.
I got permission from the director of graduate studies to audition for Hamlet. He just said, you can't be Hamlet, but you can go and audition if you want. Now, how old were you, Laura? This is 91 or 92?
Oh, I was 20.
And so I was 26. I had already graduated from college. And I'd been to drama school in Oxford, England, and I had studied with members of the Royal Shakespeare Company.
That's
So
right.
I-
We were breathless. Yes.
I had some training, but here's the thing. I was nervous.
You were nervous?
I was nervous.
What?
Yeah, but the only thing, the best way to conquer nerves is to trust in your talent. And so I walked in there going, okay, those are a bunch of theater nerds over there.
That's me.
That's the in crowd. I was that. I was part of the theater nerds in high school and in college, but here I am in graduate school. I've got 30 papers that I need to grade tonight.
But here I am.
I'm going to conquer my nerves by just walking in and showing them how, everything that I've got. And I don't remember what scene we read, but I just, I'm a pretty quick study. So I may have, read it twice, and now I'm not looking at the lines. And
Oh, fuck off.
Seriously.
That's the
Sorry.
superpower I want. Oh my God. Can you still do that? Just out of curiosity.
I'm very good with names. I wrote a poem called Horrible at Names, where the first line is, I used to say I was horrible at names when I met people until I realized that I was just asking for permission in advance to never even try. And so a lot of people who say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm horrible at names, are basically telling you, I'm not even going to fucking try.
That's right. It's not worth it to even attempt to remember your name.
But it so is. Have you ever remembered somebody's name and who they didn't expect? There's no easier way to show somebody that you respect them than to remember their name. So as a teacher, and I was a middle school teacher, I learned really early on that when you know somebody's name, you have an instant connection with them. And I'm until recently, my job was to go into all of these schools. I'm there for one day. And one of my party tricks, sometimes I go into a
Fun
school.
Uncle Taylor. Yes. Yes.
Sometimes I'll have 4 classes of 20 students. And then later on in the evening, a performance for the Parents Association. And so I learn 80 names in my classes. And I give them all hand signs. I say, if I forget your name, give me this hand sign. And, anybody whose name is Luke, they just wield a lightsaber. That to me, I know that's Luke, and that's my clue. Like the
really
hand
smart.
gesture is telling me what your name is.
Really, really smart. Yeah.
And then at the performance that night, I've done this a couple of times. It's my favorite party trick. I'll say, if I had you in class today and I learned your name, stand up. And let's say of the 80
Do you
kids,
Ed Sullivan that shit and just go, Luke,
I should
Mary,
I'll have
Kirby.
40 kids stand up, and I'll just go through and I'll name all 40 kids. And then and I'll say, if I say your name, sit down. I'll say, what's your name? Show me your hand signal. And he goes, I'll go, oh, Luke, it's you, and it's a party trick. And you know what? But the number one thing that made me good at remembering people's names was simply deciding that I was going to make it a bigger priority.
Yeah. Yes. Listen, I want to just go with me for just a quick second because I want a little more down memory lane. So after Kansas State University, I eventually arrived in New York, and both Susan and I were like tooling around the Village, the Lower East Side, artsy type venues, performing and doing things, working with Blue Man, all that. And I start hearing your name in conjunction with like the most exciting poetry slams people have ever seen. But I did not realize, I didn't know for sure it was you. I was like, how many Taylor Mollys can there be? I don't know. That just like, wouldn't that be a coincidence if it was you? But then you were on HBO's Def Poetry Jam. Tell us about all of this. Like, how did it happen? What's it like to run with a group of rock star poets? I mean, I don't think very many people in the world have that experience.
Def Poetry Jam was the brainchild of a guy who became an associate producer on the show, and he somehow managed to find Russell Simmons' brother, Danny Simmons, who is a painter and an artist. And Danny went to Russell and said, hey, look, you started Def Jam Records, and then you started Def Comedy Jam. How about spoken word poetry? So I was part of one of the, we sort of put together this, before we really knew what the show was going to look like. I was the MC. I was most deaf, and we took it to the HBO Comedy Arts Festival. And we were, not only doing the show twice a night for whatever, a week, we were also sort of auditioning for HBO. And HBO took the show and said, we're going to make it a half-hour show. And they brought in a real producer and a real director, and Most Def became the MC. And they would invite you in, and you did 2 poems in front of a live audience. And if you were lucky, they picked one. And if you were unlucky, they picked neither one. And they always had a sort of a special guest who wasn't really known for poetry. And one of the nights that I was on the show, I was backstage with Jewel.
Wow.
Jamie Foxx was on the show, did a hilarious sort of takeoff of spoken word poets. I don't get nervous for poetry shows, unless there's like over 1,000 people. I mean, that's my thing. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And, but when I'm a little bit outside my element, that's when you get nervous. Like, I was so nervous backstage, like national TV still makes me nervous.
Sure.
I hadn't done voiceovers. Then I did 10 months as the voice of Burger King. I don't know whether you remember this.
Will you say something you would have said for Burger King?
When you have it your way, it just tastes better.
There's my new ringtone. There you go. I want to swing back even further past the Def Jam, past the Burger King commercials. Will you tell us when you first keyed into the fact that you had this burgeoning superpower around poetry and oral communication? When did that show up for you?
Well, you're kind to put it that way. And it certainly didn't occur to me that way. But my father was a poet who used to write occasional poems for big family occasions, weddings and birthdays. And he even wrote a poem that he recited to my mother on New Year's Eve, 3 months before I was born. I was born in March of 1965, and this poem is called New Year's Eve, 1964. And it begins like this. 64 was a year of change and a year of great enjoyment, from the shift in Janie's silhouette to the shift in my employment, in Pal's employment. They called him Pal. So he must have gotten a new job in 64, and my mother got pregnant with me. That's the shift in the silhouette, right?
Sweet.
And so they were all these rhyming couplets, and the last couplet goes like this. And in 65, there will be more of us. One more tiny Molly torso, and we will all love each other, only just a little more so. So they were always just sweet, sort of Dr. Seuss.
Hot rhyme for torso. Yes, I love it.
Yes, isn't that great? So, but I used to watch him. I mean, I found that poem after he died. I never heard him read it, but I heard, 24 poems that he would clink his glass at a wedding. And I don't know whether you've been to an East Coast WASP wedding, but when you clink a glass there, it means somebody has a speech to give. If you're from the Midwest, it means they want the bride and the groom to kiss, but that's just cultural. So he would do these poems. And so I learned at a very young age that poetry can be, at its best, a public art form where you delight the audience and maybe bring a tear to their eye and ask them all to raise a glass and toast the bride and groom. So I had that. And my mother wrote children's books, and she was an award-winning children's book author. So words were very much a part of the part of the family. I like to tell people that in the Molly family, no one was allowed to leave the table unless it was to look up a word in the dictionary. It's not actually true, but it gives you a sense of the kind of family that we were, even if it's not
Don't
true.
let truth get in the way of a good story.
That's right. It's one of my favorite quotes. And then I was an actor, and I was the editor of the literary magazine in high school, which was called Proof Rock. And
I don't know why that was so funny to me, but it really was.
And at Bowdoin College, I was in a when I would, and this is true for Shakespeare too. If you come across a line you don't understand, just say it slower and more clearly. And you can kind of skate over it, right? Don't skate over it by going fast or pretending you do. Just say it slowly and clearly. So when I was reading poetry out loud for the first time in a literature class, and the teacher would say, "Okay, Taylor, you want to read this one?" I would just read poems slowly and clearly. Maybe try to get my voice a little deeper. And and it was in my senior year that I was taking a poetry class, and the teacher said, "Okay, before we discuss this poem, would somebody like to read it?" And I felt like I had already, I'd already been a piglet, and I'd already read something earlier that day in class, so I didn't raise my hand, but nobody else did either. And so this a young woman in the class said to the professor, "Is there anyone in particular you want to read the poem?" And she looked over at me and she said, "Well, of course, there's one person who we would all love to hear read the poem." And I looked around and I was like, "Wait,
who's she talking about?
You're talking about me? Do I do this well?" And they were like, "Yes." So that was an epiphany where I was like, "Oh, I guess I do this well."
Was that senior year high school or
that was senior year college, and then Oxford? I mean, I was an actor. I knew how to perform, but I didn't know I was good at reading poetry. And I went to drama school in Oxford for a summer program the year after college, and at the very end of this 6-week program in Oxford, they had a talent show. And God help you if you've never been to a talent show for theater nerds. So it was 1987, and I decided nobody had heard the word cultural appropriation. So Mr. Park Avenue, I wrote a rap song about being at Balliol College in Oxford. And oh my God, it went over so well that for the final 3 days of class, students who I did not even know were saying, "Oh, you're the guy. So I started writing more poetry and writing song lyrics. And 3 years later, I landed at Kansas State University because my late wife, my then wife to be, was going to University of Missouri for journalism, and I decided to go to. I said, "Well, hold on, let me see if there are any poets within a, 2-hour radius." And Jonathan Holden and Elizabeth Dodd were at Kansas State, and I wanted to study with them, and so I went and did that. But it was in grad school in Manhattan, Kansas, that one of the professors on my master's committee said, "Have you heard about this thing called the Poetry Slam? They do it once a month in Lawrence at a strip club called the Flamingo, where they give the dancers." That's where KU is. Yeah. The Flamingo Exotic Dance and Catering Lounge.
That's perfect.
Really?
And so they would give the
Really?
dancers the night off, and they would invite the
Oh my
poets
God,
to
bring
come.
on
in
the
the
poets.
There was a mirror
Fuck.
on the stage. There was a pole on the stage.
Yes.
Oh.
And that's where I first went to slam. And that's when I realized that
You were
was
home.
the perfect marriage of my talents, literary
That
and
is
performative.
fucking
Wow.
awesome.
So you
At the
learned
Flamingo.
to, yes, you learned to act first, then how to read poetry. And then it sounds like even a few years later that you actually would write poetry,
Right.
and then study
no, I was
that.
I was writing poetry in high school, but it was still a very solitary, tear-stained experience.
Okay. So then years later, you merged these talents.
I merged these. And, if you've never been to a poetry slam, you're performing in front of drunk, racist, homophobic idiots who are giving scores to your poems.
Especially when it's at the Flamingo.
I mean, really.
Right? Come on.
But it teaches you have to have a thick skin, and you have to, like anybody who goes to a poetry slam thinking that they're going to educate the audience as to what good poetry truly is about to lose, probably.
It's not about that. Yeah.
No, it's about winning the audience over. So your poems have to be accessible, and they have to be I tend to use humor, a lot.
The thing I'm loving about what you're saying, though, is you started to see these distinctions about gifts that you had, but also things that you truly enjoyed. And those distinctions were sort of coming into focus. And then you braided them together. That, I feel like in a life well lived, we have a few of those moments where we recalibrate, we see those distinctions of what we're making that we love, what we're making that we've grown tired of and we need to shed, and sort of synthesizing them together in a new creative identity. And I love the idea of you just like coming into the center of that on the stage of the Flamingo in Lawrence, Kansas.
Got a very clear picture of that.
Me too. And I like it. I love that.
I like the way you put it.
Can you take us through, how do you approach writing a poem? Do you wake up in the morning and say, I think I've got a poem in me today? What happens?
What success I have had has really been discouraging to my creative process, because I tend not to be able to sit my ass in the chair these days unless I have an idea that has driven me there. And that is not what I tell my students is the way to go about it.
Yes.
So I don't practice what I preach.
That's so honest.
Yeah. I want to be, my mentor, Billy Collins, says he starts writing. He doesn't really have any idea where it's going to go. And many great writers who I respect say, oh, I would, as soon as I think I know where the poem's going to go, I stop writing. That's not, I mean, these days I tend to be, if I sit down at the computer or in my journal, to write by hand, which I still do a lot, in cursive. I love cursive. And, I often have a great idea. I'm a good idea. An idea. I have an idea.
All of my ideas are brilliant.
But I love that. What I'm hearing you say is that if the pen is moving, even if you didn't have an idea as your ass was gently lowering itself into the chair, if you can get your fingers moving, then just the activity of doing something will bring the spark of an idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if there is I was talking to a journalist recently who said he was walking in his neighborhood in Brooklyn, and there was this mom and pop donut store on the corner. And he suddenly noticed that Dunkin' Donuts had put up a massive store that enveloped the mom and pop donut store, because it had two entrances on the two streets, on the two intersecting streets. So it wrapped around it. You could walk into Dunkin' Donuts through one door, and then come out and circumnavigate the mom and pop donut store. And he looked, and he kept walking, And it was later that day, he's like, you know what? I should pitch that to the New York Times because I think that would be a good story. Next week, he opens up the paper and somebody else already had that idea. And there's a story that the New York Times loved that story.
Yep.
Big corporate, chain store trying to drive out the mom and pop store. So if you're having a great idea, you're not the only one.
That's
and
right.
if there's a great idea, if there's a great idea out there that is looking for someone to go and spark, are you gonna go and inflame the pen of the person who is already writing, even though they don't quite know what they were sat down to say? Or are you going to go and jolt the couch potato who says, why should I write? I don't know what I would write about.
You're going to the pen that's already in motion or the pencil.
Right.
Do you have a committed, you are a professional poet. Like that's some rare air. I think that's a real accomplishment.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder if you have a commitment that you make to yourself in terms of, I'm going to make sure that my ass hits this chair and this pen is gripped in my hand X days a week. Like, do you have any sort of commitment to yourself about your practice?
Oh, wow. God, I so wish I did. So the novelist,
I love your honesty, though.
Yeah.
If you're like, I aim for this, but I hit that.
I'm growing into it and growing into the honesty. I'm about to be even more honest. Somerset Maugham was asked, do you write only when you're inspired or do you write at a certain time every day? And he said, I write only when I'm inspired. Luckily, I'm inspired every day from 7:30 to 1:45 in the afternoon. So,
exactly.
that's he knew his process was you sit your ass in the chair and you grind out your pages and then you go back and you see whether they're good. God, I'm taking a workshop with my friend Megan, and it's part of why I take workshops with my friends. Is to give myself spark new ideas and find new excavation tools.
Absolutely.
But
we condone and encourage the workshop. We like your use of it. Can I just say that you mentioned the success that you've had? I think it's safe to say that one of the successes was a poem called "What Teachers Make," which was followed by a book, etc. So Susan and I talk about this a lot, but it seems to us that very few people are having a tougher time than teachers are having right now. And so we were curious what you say to them to support them and lift them up during these insane times.
Insane. I cannot imagine what it would be like to still be a teacher like they are. I mean, I'm still a teacher, but not like they are.
Yeah.
Just to be told thank you is not enough. But it's a start, and to a sincere thank you. Also, I sort of know a little bit about where they're coming from, so I know what the challenges are. And but I think maybe my next poem is going to be. I read a educational philosopher wrote a column about how we need to stop talking about when kids get back to school, what we need to do to catch them up. So I want to write a poem in honor of those teachers who know that the best way to teach is to meet students where they are. And so when the kids come back to school in person, I know a lot of teachers who will be meeting their students face to face for the first time and saying, "Oh, you're so much taller than I thought you were," So I want to write a poem in honor of, to celebrate like all the things that kids have learned in this
yes.
pandemic.
The learning that's happening right
The
now.
learning
I
that's
love
happening,
that.
even though
Yeah.
Zoom is terrible. One of my favorite quotes is Mr. Rogers, who said, we think of play in children, we think of playing as a break from learning. But for kids, playing is learning. Mr. Rogers truly understood the power of play.
Yes, he did.
Mhm.
So I don't feel like that's a sufficient answer to your question.
No, I love your idea of
Yeah.
writing this piece. I love that, and I look forward to hearing that
I'm
piece.
going to make
The
myself
poem-
a note.
Yeah,
to
the
write
poem
that.
will
Make yourself a
be-
note.
Because
Sit your
I've-
ass down in a chair.
Yeah. But I've had, there are a couple of great ideas that have come to me several times, and I've never written them down because I think, oh, thank goodness that idea came back to me. Well, this time I don't have to write it down because it's so good I'm going to remember it.
That's why people need a spark file, Taylor Molly.
Right? That's
Put
right.
it in your spark file.
It's true.
right.
It's true. Taylor, is there, we talked about your past. We talked about how you were formed. Looking towards the future, and maybe just one day into the future, who knows? Is there a creative thing that you need to do before you're done?
Well, can I tell you about the one I'm doing? That's sort of a,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
The short version is it's called Metaphor Dice. And it comes out of 20 years of teaching poetry workshops in classes, often to kids who don't want to be there. And I was doing this activity where you put an abstract noun and a concrete noun and an adjective on the board, and you put them together, and you create an adjective. Create a metaphor. Like
What's an abstract?
an abstract noun is something. It's a thing, but it's not something you can touch. It's like loyalty, democracy.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
Okay.
So
Love.
that's an abstract noun.
Love. What is
And then
love?
a concrete noun is like
Something you can
a glass
touch,
or
a baseball.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
adjective,
Okay.
you know that. Scuff, old,
Got it.
disused. Love is a disused baseball.
I love learning things.
That's a metaphor right there. And it's a metaphor you wouldn't necessarily have come up with if somebody said, oh, I need a metaphor for love. Love is a disused baseball. But it's a sports-related item, so maybe there's a kid who's like, wait, I played baseball. I never knew I could use a baseball as a metaphor. And so there was this girl, and I said, why aren't you involved in the activity? And she said, I'm really more of a math science person. And I said, well, that's okay, because a metaphor is an equation between an idea and a thing. And I don't know where I came up with that, but it's a great way to think about it.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, go ahead, pick 3 words. She's like, well, what about this? My father, broken mirror. I was like, okay, my father is a broken mirror. That's a metaphor. If you said that, nobody would ever think you meant that literally. They know that you mean that figuratively. And now they're just waiting for you to explain, how is that true? And that's what you do in a poem. And she said, I think I can do that. And I said, okay, go ahead, write down some lines. I'll come around. I'll go check on some other people. Use the phrase, which is to say. And when I came back, she had written this. My father is a broken mirror, which is to say, he's been shattered into 1,000 pieces. He's hard to hold without cutting yourself. My mother says he is 7 years of bad luck. But even in the smallest shards, I can still recognize my own reflection. And she looked at me and said, do you think I can turn that?
Did she win the poetry slam?
Oh my
Jesus
God.
Christ.
Oh my God.
I have
She would
chills.
have. Yes, I had chills. And the chills I got then made me think, I've got to invent some kind of game so that I can get students to this
What
level.
a good spark.
And that's what Metaphor Dice is. It's these 12 dice, red, white, and blue. And you roll them and you arrange them.
God.
Red, white, blue. Here, I got a set right here. You want me to roll a set?
Yes.
Yeah, roll a set.
I've got the blue dice that has mirror. I've got my birth. My birth was a handed down songbird. The handed down songbird
which is to
of
say
my birth. My mother has sung me many stories of the handed down songbird of my birth. And then I did this activity, I sort of slowly developed it starting in 2016. I taught at a school called the Avenues the World School, and that's where Surrey Cruise went.
Yes,
and that's where
I know Avenues.
Robert De Niro's grandchildren went,
Yep.
and like it's so expensive. It's like $100,000 a year. They have a private security. Israeli security, they've bought an entire building on the west side of Manhattan. And I was asking my students, they were working, and I said, hey, can I take some pictures of people working? And one of my students said, no, Mr. Molly, no pops. And I said, what? And they said, Mr. Molly, paparazzi. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm not on a one syllable,
No pops.
basis with paparazzi. Okay. So they all did this dice in the originally the dice were made out of paper, and the students got to write their own words on them.
Wow.
Which was great. Now they're acrylic. And I had to write my own words. But before I get to the next iteration of the dice, and this is probably a longer answer than you wanted, but once every kid has created a set of paper dice, at the end of the day, I collect all the dice by color. So all the reds are together; those are the abstract nouns. All the whites are the adjectives, and the blues are the concrete nouns. And then you can use them. The dice have a second life, because if in a workshop the next day, a kid says, back then all I wanted was my mother's love. I say, well, why don't you turn that into a metaphor? He goes, how do I do that? And you say, could we have the box of white dice? But if they roll white and blue, all I wanted was my mother's love becomes all I wanted was the unspoken sideshow of my mother's love.
Oh,
which is great. And then you're hoping the kid will, and like the whole class will go, ooh. And then the kid goes, wait, do I have to use that? Because I think I just thought of something better.
There you go.
There you go.
And you have these dice for sale on your website?
They're on, if you want them tomorrow, you go to Amazon and you give Jeff Bezos $20. Oh. And I'll get some of that.
But we want to support our local poet.
But if you want to support your local business, you go to metaphordice.com.
That is some really, really cool turnkey curriculum for all those teachers out there.
Yep.
Maybe not the chemistry teachers, but maybe the chemistry teachers who are listening to this and are like, what am I going to teach tomorrow? I love this, Taylor. I love this. There's your gift to the teachers right there. I love that.
Plus
actually, it gets one better.
What?
And
there's
one
more?
better. There's more. I wanted to create I'll tell you something that sparks joy is I love, I'm a maker, I love fiddling things with my hands and making things. So I wanted to create, the next time I go to a conference like the National Association of English, National Council of Teachers of English, NCTE, I rent a booth there and I roll metaphor dice and I do a reading for all the teachers there. There's a AWP, which is the Associated Writing Programs, big English nerd, annual English nerd conference that I also go and sell a lot of metaphor dice there. I wanted to have a business card that I could hand out there. And so then I started developing this idea like, what if my business card could be folded up into dice?
What?
What if it were a big business card? And I thought of producing like scandal dice, where you would roll it and go, my thesis professor is off fucking my first book.
There's like the dirty version of the dice.
The dirty version. I wanted people to take away this card. And the more I started thinking about it, the more I realized, wait, why don't, I've made plenty of sets of metaphor dice out of paper, and it's really time consuming to cut out these dice. If you've ever folded a six-sided die into 2 dimensions or unfolded it, there are 11 different ways you can configure the 6 squares so that they can be folded into a 6-sided die with tape, right? So I designed this card that with with the layout of the red, the white, and the blue die. And I quickly did away with the idea of scandal dice. But I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll get these cards like pre-punched. So they're perforated so that you can sort of just rip out. And everywhere you need to fold the die, I'll score it. I'll have the machine score it. Mm-hmm. And that's called a die cut. Mm-hmm. And then I had this epiphany. It's like, wait, as long as I've popped out a six little squares that can be folded into a cube, as long as the other side was the same color, they could be reversible. And then I got high. And I designed a cube that can be put together without tape. So it's got these interlocking tabs. So I haven't produced it yet, but I just this week sent off to the printer the design for Metaphor Dice paper. And it's going to be on one side, I'm holding a mock-up in my hands. On one side, you've got my words, love is a broken spell. My father is an expensive drum. So those are my words. And on the part that gets ripped away, those are all the instructions. But when you flip it over, it's blank. And finally, the kids get to write their own words again. And each card is less than $1.
Amazing.
And they're made in America. So I can, $20 will get you 30 cards so every kid can get a set of dice, as opposed to spending $20 to buy one set of 12 acrylic dice, which are beautiful, but they're expensive and they're made in China.
Wow.
Love that.
I just like the many ways your mind works. It's fascinating. And that you're then gifting. That's right. You're gifting it so that other people can, benefit from literally a spark that then can generate sparks in their own minds. Like that's one of my favorite things about it. When you said the story of the student who was like, now that we got to that, I think I actually have another idea. Like that's super exciting.
If you go to metaphordice.com and you buy a set for yourself for $20, as you are checking out, you can, for $7, buy a set that I promise will get sent to a teacher on my list.
Come on.
That's amazing. You have no way of tracking that I will follow through.
Yeah.
But
we've got your word on it.
But people do it anyway. And I have been able to give away over 1,000 sets to teachers who have signed up on my list. And I owe this idea to my business partner, Oliver. Oliver has the MBA and I have the MFA. So we're a great partnership. And he was the one who said, hey, whatever we end up doing, however much they end up costing, people are looking for ways to be generous and they just need us to help them. Yeah. So let's sell a set at cost and ship it for free. So it's one of my favorite things to do. And I
love it so much.
The only thing they never get to the teacher who receives the set of dice never gets to know who sent it to them. And the only way they can thank them is to take a picture of a poem that they wrote or of their students working or a role and post it to social media using the hashtag metaphorical angel. And if you search that hashtag, you will see a litany of gratitude.
Wow. Metaphorical angel.
Yes.
Taylor, here's a question we're obsessed with.
Okay.
You do a lot of things. You work very hard at these things. What's it all for?
Do people have you heard some
We've
fantastic
run
answers?
the gamut.
Would it be amazing if there was one right answer to this question?
Just one. And has anyone
that
gotten it
reminds
right
me.
yet?
Hope you nail it.
But yeah, I mean, what gets you? Why do you get up in the morning? Why do you continue to put pen to or pencil to paper in cursive writing? Why does it matter? Why does any of this matter?
I don't know whether this is going to answer your question, but I'm launching into it the way I would like to be able to start poems, not knowing where they're going to end up.
Great.
But Emerson said that to believe that what is true for you in your heart of hearts is true for all mankind, that is genius. So for me, it is, I am trying to find that thing inside me that is true for me, because I know that I must not be the only one.
Yes. Yes.
How'd I do?
Yes.
You did great.
I love
You
that
did
answer.
great.
That's much more eloquent. We
You
talk about
quoted somebody really fancy.
Super.
That raises your points on that answer.
But truth
You're
is
doing
part
great.
of like when Susan and I, we talk about our passions, freedom, truth, authenticity. And boy, Emerson put it, I'm going to steal that quote. I'm totally going to steal
Well, I
it.
think I have a better answer now.
Oh, okay.
You know why I do it? Because when you have it your way, it just tastes better.
Oh my
Bringing
God.
it back to the king.
Finally, Taylor Molly, what or who is sparking you these days?
I love listening to the genius of my children.
Oh,
yes.
I
That's
love
awesome.
what they say. And when my wife was pregnant with our daughter, it was in the summer. She gave birth at the end of August. So for the final couple of, she works in downtown Manhattan. She's a senior editor at HarperCollins. When she takes the subway, if she hits her 2 trains right, she can make it from our place in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, to downtown Manhattan in about 12 minutes.
Nice.
But if she doesn't, and if you're pregnant and it's August and no idiot is going to give you his seat, motherfucker, it was awful. So if I didn't have a gig to go to, I would drive her, and I could drive her there it took about the same time, 12 minutes to drive over the Brooklyn Bridge, which has no toll. And sometimes I would take, my son who was 2 at the time. And, we talk, we have a little breakfast date, and I would drop my wife off, and I would come off the Brooklyn Bridge and like pull a little U-turn, drop her off, and she was 2 blocks from work, and then I would zip right back on the bridge and come right back to Brooklyn. And my son says, "Daddy, why does mommy have to go to work?" And I said, "Well, we've talked about this. Why do you think?" And he said, "Because somebody has to pay for the money." And I said, "Yes, that is it. I'm just a poet, but somebody has to pay for the money and get the health insurance."
Oh, God.
Somebody has to pay for the money. Oh my goodness. That's it. This episode of the Spark File was made on Muncie, Lenape, and Seminole land, and we hope it put another bunch of sparks in your file. Listen to us. If there is a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and fanned it into a creative flame and you'd like to share that with us, and we have been getting some goodies lately. We hope that you'll email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We will even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you've got to share a creative risk that you have taken recently.
And be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a way that if you like the podcast, you can help us out by subscribing, rating, 5-star reviewing, and share it with people that you love. And if you didn't like it, I don't know, Taylor, what do you say to your critics?
Thank you for coming.
How gracious.
So
My
gracious.
God.
If something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we're writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
You got to take it
And make it.
it.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Taylor.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I wanna make or how I wanna be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.